this is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Welcome to our Fireside Chat. We are delighted you've joined us this evening, and we're blessed tonight to have Harry Neuman, who is a grief counselor. His experience, his love for God, his love for people, his experience we are going to share. But before we do, let's take a moment and seek God's power and presence in this hour of power. Gracious and glorious God, the God of all comfort, we come now, O God, asking for your divine power and presence as we share this conversation together. May you get the glory, and may your people be blessed, strengthened, encouraged, and comforted by the words that we share and by the experiences that we bring. In the wonderful, marvelous name of our God do we pray. Amen. Here at Bethlehem, our commitment and our mission is to love God and serve people. And we seek to develop a holistic ministry that speaks to the whole person. As a result of that, our grief ministry, led by Terry Mason Jones. Even as I speak now, my heart is heavy as a number of individuals just in this one congregation have been called home to glory, and for the pain and grief that so many families share. Spouses, parents, siblings, friends. And yet God has given us the opportunity to experience what it means to grieve in a meaningful way. Someone has said, and I believe it's true, that grief is not a symbol of weakness, nor is grief a lack of faith. Grief simply is a symbol of love. And it takes time to grieve. And unfortunately, many times people are grieving and we're not able to help because we don't have the experience or the knowledge. But I'm grateful for this man who I'm sitting next to, who has given so much to so many at Abington Hospital with a program that's designed to help particularly youth as they have lost loved ones. And so I'm going to ask him now to talk about the program at Abington, and then in a few moments we hear some of his own experiences. But right now, can you share with us the work that you're doing at Abington has been done for a number of years?
Well, thank you, Pastor. I'm honored and blessed to be here today. I'd like to begin with a remembrance prayer, and then I'll speak to your question of safe harbor. And it goes like this. Source of light, source of life, spirit of compassion, we give thanks for the fullness of our hearts, for the lives that we remember in this gathering. Let the meaning of their lives live on in us. May the light that they have given us shine on in our lives, our hearts and memories. Help us to find the courage and the faith we need each day to carry on a way of hope before us, mend our hearts, and teach us to be comforters to one another. So I was sharing with Pastor Quann a few moments ago what occurred 20 plus years ago at Abington Hospital, and my mentor asked if I would help in finding a grieving center and a teaching center that could come and bring the wisdom and experience that they have to our community. We've celebrated 20 years. We've worked with thousands of families. We work with families who have lost a child, who have lost a parent, and we have circles 3 nights a week. If you're 10 years old and your dad died, you sit in a circle with 11 other boys and girls. And it's a chance to give a voice to what's living inside these kids. And it's a place for these kids to know that they're not alone. And that is a tremendous thing, that these kids who feel totally alienated can come to a place and share their loss and their pain. And it's working. And the amazing thing is that we've done it without fees, not a single cent of fees. So we've been blessed with lots of contributors and lots of support from the hospital, and nothing but gratitude. for all of that?
I am certainly moved by that experience. My sons lost their mother. My youngest son was 11 years old, and we had hospice come in at that particular time, and fortunately, they've been able to develop and grow and have a heart to give back. But I remember those days like it was yesterday, and I'm grateful for Safe Harbor and what they do to provide the healing that's necessary, extremely necessary for young people, and for all of us who go through the loss of a parent or a child or someone close to us. At the same time, when we experience, I've learned also, unfortunately, that the church sometimes is unprepared to provide the care and support that families need. I know that here at Bethlehem, we respond quickly with all of our care and love and providing for the services. We have one of our ministers, Reverend Keith Hodges, who has his own funeral home, and he's there to comfort families and provide for them. And then our deacons and deaconess provide aftercare. But many times you move on to another family, and those families are still struggling. And we talk also about our grief ministry, and many families are reluctant to engage in it. And maybe all because, again, we sometimes use cliches about, God will take care of this, or, may not have enough faith. But in your experience, what are the steps that one goes through grief? I remember Dr. Kubler-Ross, the steps of denial and guilt and all those other kind of things. Could you tell us something about some of those steps that people go through?
Well, you touched on this earlier. Grief never ends, but it changes. It's a passage, not a place to stay. Grief is not a sign of weakness nor a lack of faith. It is the price of love. You touched on something that is very important in terms of how to relate to families and what to say. And I often hear people say, I don't know what to say, And to me, I have been teaching now for 20 years cliches to avoid. And I have a whole sheet of them. Okay, I'm not going to give you all of the examples, but I'm going to give you the bullets. Okay, so the first cliche to avoid is the guilt cliche. If you look around, you'll always find someone who's worse off than you. This is the work of the devil. If I were you, I would do it this way. Count your blessings. Guilt cliches. Be strong cliches. Big boys don't cry. The children are flexible. They'll bounce back. You must be strong for your children. Support groups are for weaklings. Discount cliches. I know how you feel. That's impossible, Unless you're walking in somebody else's shoes, you don't know how to tie the laces. You really don't. So the discount cliches. I know how you feel. Silence is golden. If there's anything I can do, just call me. Just call me. The hurry up cliches. You're not your old self. Out of sight, out of mind. Time will heal. And lastly, God cliches. God needs him more than you do. He's happy now, for he's with God. God needed some new flowers for his garden in heaven. So these are some of the cliches that people are living with. But I want to mention grief reactions, common grief reactions. And they are varied and they are many. So there is the physical grief reaction. And what does that look like? Pain, fatigue, exhaustion, low energy, sleep disruption, appetite disruption, shortness of breath. I'm just giving you some of them. Emotional reactions: shock, numbness, emptiness, sadness, sorrow for the one who died, loneliness, longing, yearning, anger, guilt, regret. Mental grief reactions: disbelief, confusion, disorientation, absent-mindedness, forgetfulness, poor concentration, distraction. Social grief reactions: being isolated by others, withdrawing from social activities, diminished desire for conversation, being widowed, single, etc. Behaviors, grief reactions, crying, searching for the deceased, carrying special objects, going to the gravesite, making and keeping an altar, keeping belongings intact.
Let me ask you a question, because you hit on something else right now, and you tell me if I'm way off base. Because many times, even as we talk now, people look at it like this is so sad. But can grief be healthy? Is grief healthy? Do we need to grieve?
Grief in itself is medicine. Is medicine.
Say that some more, because I think, again, somebody gets tuned out when we talk about grief, but it is medicine for the soul, for the heart.
Yeah.
We need to have the opportunity to grieve.
So I want to share a tidbit of a story of a 14-year-old who I was working with at Safe Harbor. And the kids come in and they check in, and we stand in a circle and we talk about why we're there and what the meaning of this time is. And this young person lost her mom. The death was a suicide. The death was by hanging. And this 14-year-old found her mother hanging in the basement. And when we asked her to check in and speak to what's living in her heart right now, she said, if I hear sorry one more time, I'm going to explode. And everyone just went silent. And I looked at her and I said, so that's what you don't want. You don't want to be told again and again and again, I'm sorry. And I said, what do you want to hear? And she said, what I want to hear is, I'm with you. Big difference. A big, big difference. What these kids learn is they are not alone. And to have an ally, to have an advocate, to have someone that can be with them, truly with them, without judgment, and allowing whatever needs to unravel. And that's why at Safe Harbor, we use all the creative arts. We use music, we use dance, we use theater, we use letter writing, journaling, arts and crafts. All of these are vehicles to express what's living inside, because sometimes there aren't words. And we ask kids to write letters to their parents or write letters to those that they loved. And it's a visceral experience, and it's different than trying to find a way to relate or to be open. So these are the things that we do, and it works.
I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your sharing this. Unfortunately, I grew up when in the church, if someone took their life, suicide, they were looked at as opposed to going to heaven, they would go to hell. And that kind of thought process, particularly now as we have experienced mental illness over these last 2 years, isolation, depression, all kinds of things. And so we're not to judge people and don't know what has led them to take their life. And I think, again, our own sensitivity and how we talk and how we express. So you gave cliches, but also more than cliches is some of our thinking that is so far from truth, so far from compassion. To say to a parent or to have a parent think that if their child committed suicide, they would go to hell. And is that how we think?
Well, to me, suicide is a symptom. It's a symptom of alienation. It's a symptom of loneliness. It's a way out. And to imagine the volume of pain that someone must be in to do something like that, you know. And it's also a call for help, you know. The politically correct phrase is completed suicide, okay? And fortunately, the stigma that you just spoke to has lessened somewhat. And if we can understand that this is a desperate act, and this is mental illness, someone who is sound in body and mind and spirit is not going to take their lives because their lives are sacred. And if you feel that there's nothing to live for, there's no one to be there for you, and you're totally alone and you're in this pain, and the only way out of it is to take your life, very, very sad. The number of veterans who are taking their lives because they can't cope with what they saw, what they did, what they're feeling, and they can't come back into a culture that doesn't understand. How do you explain this to someone, you know? I can only tell you that when I became a bereaved parent myself 15 years ago, losing my son who was 35 years old, everything changed for me. I mean, I felt I was compassionate up until that point, but my compassion not only grew for myself, but it grew for everyone in the room who was in a similar situation. I know what that feels like. And I don't even have to say anything sometimes. I can walk around a circle of people and I can feel this situation. I can see it in their eyes, in their breathing, in the way that they're looking, you know, and identify who they are. This is a bereaved parent, because I am one. And it's a journey that I never thought I would have to take. And that was a huge shock. And sometimes the helpers need help. And I got help because I knew I needed help. I needed to express my pain and my love and my sadness with someone who was skilled, who could hold me, you know, physically and spiritually and emotionally, could hold my pain and didn't have to desert me or abandon me, you know, or run away from or be fearful of what I'm living with. Because once you're able to express some of this, Pastor, there's a change.
I believe that even as we preach as pastors and preachers, that there's some experiences God gives to us so that we can be relevant with those that we seek to serve. Mm-hmm. Now, every experience of life is not necessarily given to the pastor or to the preacher, but there's some. And for myself, I know what it is to lose a spouse. Mm-hmm. I can have empathy for one who goes through that journey. I know what it is to see my sons go through losing their mother. And even my second wife, when she lost a daughter, so she has that kind of empathy for families and things. And I also know, again, even as you talk about suicide, that in my book I've written not where you start, where you finish, and talk about growing up and some of the discord and pain in my home. And when I was about 17 or 18 years old, I tried to take my life. I was at the point of I couldn't take it anymore. I thought that was the only way out. Unfortunately, it was not successful. But I do remember, and I have a heart for persons who are at that point where they feel as though there's nothing to live for, nothing. And sometimes life boxes us in, and we can't always see. And so I think there's some experiences God gives to us, not all of them again, but how we can identify with people. And you're working with hospice and your own experience. And even though that is painful, sometimes God uses those experiences to help somebody else. And I don't think that you would be the person you are without having that experience with your son that has allowed you to help others, working with all the things that you do over the years and healing for yourself, but healing for other families, and not those cliches that we kind of say that have no substance, and or some of the theological beliefs that we have that need to be reviewed and looked upon, whether or not it's suicide or depression or whatever it may be, or grief itself. Because again, you gave a list of cliches, and I know there's many of them in the church about I know how you feel, well, you don't know how they feel, or trust God and all those other kind of things. And even as I referred back before, that some people look at this conversation as being, a downer, but it's an upper, because all of us will experience at one time the loss of someone. None of us are immune from it. So, we're born to die, and so that's going to happen to all of us. How we handle it is something different. Can you talk about that again?
Well, we're all in borrowed bones. And it's sometimes it's hard. You see, the suffering is thinking that things don't change, and everything changes. You see, so, and everyone that you love is going to die, and you're going to die, and to really get a handle on that, you got to get close to it sometimes. I had an experience 35 years ago when my sister from another mother was diagnosed. And in those days, if you asked how long you had to live, the docs, the oncologists gave you, metaphorically, they gave you an hourglass. And when she left the hospital after some surgery, that hourglass was 11 months long. And she did her bucket list for about 4 or 5 months. And then she got into bed and she waited. And in those days, this is the mid-'80s, doctors weren't even saying the word cancer. When my father was diagnosed with prostate cancer, the urologist, who I knew quite well, he was a Germantown Friends School parent as well, and he said to my father, "Welcome to the C Club." He can't say the word cancer. And what happened with my sister was that all of the people that said they loved her were terrified, almost as if her cancer was contagious. And the more that they moved away from her, the more I moved close. And I remember when her husband called me the day of her death, and he said, "Today's the day," because he was a physician, he knew. He said, "Today's the day if you want to be here." I said, "I'm on my way." And I'm living in Winmore, PA, and she's in Swarthmore without the Blue Route, and I'm on my way. And we watched her take her last breath, the 3 kids, the favorite aunt, the husband, and myself. And I said to the 3 kids, I'm changing the direction of my life. I'm going to be a grief counselor, and I'm going back to school, and I'm going to spend as much time as I need to become a counselor. And I spent 7 years doing it. So it's been 33 years. Well, at 1988 is when I walked into she died in 86. And 88, I walked into Abington Hospital and started, I took the first training to be a hospice volunteer. And I knew in every cell of my body that I was in the right place. And as I said earlier, I needed a place to put my grief, a place that would understand what I needed and allow me to learn and grow and change and give. And I know that when I'm out of my own way and I'm out of my own pain around my son and my sister, life is beautiful and life is meaningful. And I am crystal clear that this is my passion, this is my mission, this is my life mission. And I have gratitude every day that I'm doing what I do. And then 4 years ago, as I shared with you earlier, I became an end-of-life doula. Actually, it's a death doula, but we try to soften the blow when we say end of life. The word doula is actually a Greek word, and it means woman of service. And the classes that I was in, I was very much, as I shared with you, 72 people in New York City for a week of training. There were 70 women and 2 men, and I was one of them. And I'm where I want to be, where I need to be, and where my life has meaning. And there is a book that was written about the 6th stage of grief, and it's finding meaning in the loss. What has it taught you? What have you learned? What do you want to do now in your life? What do you want to do as far as giving back to others? And to me, there's nothing like it. Serving others. And that's what you do every day. And that's what this church is all about. Service and giving to others in a way that is exquisite. I can feel it when I walk in the door here. I can feel it with every person that's attached to this church. And I was raised in a synagogue. And yet I feel the love, and I feel the compassion, and I feel the empathy with you and with everybody in this church. And I'm the guy who lives down the road at the Georgetown condos. I'm less than a mile away. So my hope and my prayer is that your grief ministry and I can become friends and work together and share together. And I can share what I've learned and be with folks who are in the situation that I was in and that I've moved through. It's about moving with, and it's about being with. And that's the gift, because when you've got this community of love around you, that's what you feel. You feel the love. And if you don't have it, you're frightened, you're alienated, you're scared, and you're alone. And that's not a good place to be when you're grieving. I want to share one other piece here about the difference between grieving and mourning. And this is something that was written by one of my teachers, Alan Walfelt. And I met Alan at Abington Hospital because he used to come and speak every year. He has a center in Colorado. And here's what he says. Grief is the constellation of internal thoughts and feelings we have when someone we love dies. Think of grief as the container. It holds your thoughts, feelings, and images of your experience when someone you love dies. In other words, grief is the internal meaning given to the experience of loss. Mourning is when you take the grief you have on the inside and express it outside yourself. Another way of defining mourning is grief gone public, or the outward expression of grief. There is no one right way to mourn. That's Alan. 6 months before my son died, I was in Colorado learning how to understand grieving parents, in different ways. And 6 months later, I became the persons that I was studying about and learning about so I could help others. And then I needed help myself because I knew that I couldn't fix myself, that I needed someone to guide me through this process, this passage that is the price of love. It's the price of love.
I must admit that there's so many things that you're saying that I can relate to. One is I want to make sure that you are connected to Terry Mason Jones, who leads our grief ministry, that collectively together we can bring about some healing and some knowledge to all of us as a congregation. On the other hand, the fourth Sunday in November, we will have a memorial service to remember the countless people who have lost loved ones, and we have a memorial wall that has been dedicated to remember those loved ones as well with my soul. But there's something else I want to ask, because again, sense of conviction. I love my pastor. He's been like my father and my mentor, and every now and then he will say to me, Charles, I want to get together and plan for my service. And I push back. I don't want to hear it, Pastor. Or then if I bring it up with my sons, it's quiet in the room. Nobody wants to talk about their father, being deceased. In fact, even my wife and I, we don't talk about it that much. If we talk about it, we joke about it, not in a serious way. And I found out also that, now when you go to the physician, they ask you, do you have a living will? You want to make sure you have a living will, and then having a will to leave your possessions and things. But when it comes to death, even though we know ultimately it's coming, it's something that we kind of shy away from. And again, I come back to myself, Pastor, because when he's trying to reach out to me to say we want to do this, and I'm giving a question, we don't want to talk about that, Pastor. Why is that?
Discomfort, ill at ease. It's a downer, in quotes. So here's what I did to fix that. I'm in an organization called the Mankind Project. It's sort of a new age Rotary Club. What's it about? It's about missions of service. So my mission, which I've never changed, since 1997 is that I co-create a world with greater love and kindness through healing myself and serving others. So I have been sitting for 23 years in a circle of men. There's 12 of us. And we meet every other Wednesday night for 3 hours. Now, we've been on Zoom for the last 18 months. But our connection and our love for one another, there's nothing that's off the table. There's nothing that is unspoken. And this is a place, these are allies, these are friends, these are brothers, these are soulmates. Nothing's off the table. We've lost 7 men in the last 2 years, and I've been connected to every one of those deaths. So imagine getting a call from a man, and this is what he asks. When is it time to tell my daughters I'm dying? Who else does he have to go to ask that question? And my answer is now. If you have the question, now's the time. And I remember a memorial service at a place called the Quadrangle, which is in Haverford. It's a continuing care facility. I work in the Holly building, which is the skilled nursing and the hospice building. And I walked in, and I'm about to see my client, and she's at a memorial service, and they're reading off all the names of the people that have died in that building in the last 12 months. There were 42 people. And she looks completely dazed. You know, how could she possibly absorb all these names and all this pain? And I walk over to her when it's over, and she looks at me, and she's blank. There's no affect. There's nothing. And looks like she doesn't even recognize me. And I said to her, I spoke her name. I looked right at her, and I said, "It's Harry. It must be Wednesday. Do you remember me?" And she looked at me, and as if I was crazy. And she said, "Remember you? I love you. I love you." And this is the mother-in-law of a man who was my acupuncturist in Mount Airy, and a guy that had a meditation center there that I was part of for 2 decades. And when he found out about the work I was doing as a doula, he said, "I want you to work with my mother-in-law." And the interesting thing was, this woman's had strokes. She's got memory loss. She has dementia. And when so I said, "Well, is this an interview or is it an audition?" And he said, "Well, maybe it's a combination of the two." I said, "Well, what do you want? Is there a goal that I need to accomplish here when I'm with her?" And he said, "Well, you need to she doesn't smile and she doesn't laugh, ever. You need to make her smile while you're here. And better yet, if you make her laugh." So I tried, a bunch of things, nothing worked. And finally I lifted up my badge and I said, "I'm Harry, I'm a volunteer at Abington Hospital." I said, "But guess what? They can't fire me, I'm a volunteer." And she burst out laughing. I then had about 7 minutes to do what they said was, you have to do something where when you leave, she will reference you. Because if she doesn't reference you, you were never here. So I pull out, I have a bag over my shoulder, and in the bag is a hand puppet. And his name is Larry. He's a llama, okay? Harry and Larry, the llama, the listening llama, okay? So what I haven't shared with you is that my education, my formal education, was in the theater. I studied at the American Academy in New York. I studied at the Art Institute in Chicago. And I spent 2 years in France studying theater, mime, and acrobatics. So I pull this hand puppet out, and we start talking to her. And Harry and Larry start singing to her and singing to the daughter and the son-in-law. And I finally leave. And about 2 hours later, I get a call from the daughter who says, "Guess what?" I go, "What?" She goes, "You're hired." She referenced you. I said, "Me?" She goes, "No, Harry and Larry." So I'm using the skills that I have. I'm using the gifts that I was given as a human being, and that my parents. I remember walking into my father's office and saying, "Dad, I don't want to go to college." "What do you mean?" I mean, it was like saying I didn't want to live. How are you going to take care of yourself? You need to be educated. I said, Dad, I want to go to theater school. I want to be an actor, And he looked at me like I was insane, And then he said to me, but you've never really done a lot of theater, I said, well, let me see if I'm accepted. Let's see what the American Academy has to say about all this, And I was accepted. And I'm very grateful because what I learned is how to relate to all kinds of people, I wound up working in my father's clothing factory, believe it or not. And the gift was there were women from 15 different countries, and my job was to keep the peace, not only to bring the work and hire people, but to keep the peace. And I remember the story, and this is in the mid-'80s, a woman who was from Jamaica. At her machine was skipping. I made note of it. I was very kind and easy. I said, we're going to get the mechanic. He's going to fix your machine. I leave the floor. She runs over to her African-American boss, who I hired. And she says, Harry Neuman doesn't like me because I'm from Jamaica. And this woman looks at her and says, Harry Neuman doesn't care if you're green with orange polka dots. What he cares about is who you are as a human being and whether you're a good match for this business. And then she said to her, don't play the race card here. It won't work. And it won't work because I am the SOB. I am the son of boss. And I get to make the peace. I had people come into an office very much. I was reminded when I saw your office. I also had pictures and all kinds of things on the wall there, but it was a place where I had a desk and I had a sofa. And people would come in and sob. People who were living in projects, people who didn't have husbands, people who were sole support for 5 kids. And they'd just come in and cry. And I gave bereavement. I gave 3 days bereavement pay to a woman who didn't have kids, who lost her parakeet. Because that was her child. And when I called her to offer my condolences, and I said, Rose, I want you to take 3 days and just do whatever you need to do. Take care of yourself. And then come back to work. Because if someone is dealing with somebody who's in prison, somebody who died, somebody who's in jail, they can't really concentrate on what they're doing. Take the time you need. We'll make it work. And what is that about? That's about flexibility. And it's about honoring someone's life situation. Not pretending that it's not there, but to acknowledge what it is and to speak to it and to honor it and bless it and gift it. There was never a single person that came in who understood what the job was and left with a grudge. Never. Because these are my responsibilities as an employer, and these are your responsibilities as an employee. And as long as we both understand what's on both sides of the paper here, I said, but we're working for Nike, we're working for Adidas, we're working for Reebok. These people are very demanding, and they want skills. They want skills. And if you have them, great. And if you don't have them, you'll find another job. That was the hardest thing that I did, but it was also the most rewarding, because to keep that continuity and to keep that connection with all of these people and to create a family, the way that you create a family in this church, that's a gift. That's a skill, and it doesn't happen overnight. But that, to me, was the mission, was to keep the peace, because without the peace, what do you have? You have chaos.
You don't have anything.
You have nothing.
I know one of the things that I'm sensitive to is the time, this is a profound conversation. And I also remember, quite honestly, when cremation was something that in the church was not looked upon as being as valuable or as meaningful to the Christian. And now we have seen, obviously, this last 19 months, many cremations taking place. But also tell me a little bit about how the services take place within the synagogue, the Jewish faith. You sit in Shiva, and there's a span of time in which. So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, okay. Well, first I want to tell you that my mentor, who is actually a Sufi minister, he was a Jew. He's been in Maui for 50 years. He has the only green funeral home in all of Hawaii, not just Maui, but all of Hawaii. So there's cremation, but people are buried in baskets. People are buried in shrouds. People are buried at sea. It's a green funeral home, okay? And this man is my guiding light. And I remember when it was, Hallmark makes up these holidays. It was sibling day. And I wrote to him and I said, I feel so close to you. We're siblings, we're siblings. And he wrote back one word, and the word was twins. Twins, okay? That's how close we've gotten, okay? So last week I was at one of my closest friends, a man in my circle. His mother died. She was 100 years old. She had a beautiful life. He has 3 sisters. He was the youngest of 4 kids. He had 3 sisters that took care of the mother up in the Boston area. So they chose to have a graveside service, and the heavens were, compatible. The weather was great, and I called him and said, I know this is a family thing. I know this is a family thing at the graveside. I want to be there. I love you. I want to be there. I want to support you. I don't have to say anything. I don't have to do anything. All I have to do is show up. And he said, please come. Please come. And bring Phyllis, my partner. Okay, and we came. It was beautiful. It was just beautiful. There was a rabbi, and there was storytelling, and then an invitation for Shiva, which is morning. We did a 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. Shiva, and we sat around, and we said some prayers, but we lit a Yortzeit candle, okay? And this is a 7-day candle, that we light at this time and let it burn and say prayers. And he used it as a talking stick. So here he's passing this candle around and going around the room, family, friends, the room is full of people, and people are sharing, grandkids are sharing what it was like, to travel to Boston, to be with Nana, and what her house looked like, and what she was like, and the things that she did, and the things that she said, and the things that she cooked for them, and the way that she was with them, and the love that they received from her. In all of the years that I've been attending Shivas and funerals and wakes, I've never heard such glowing love coming from a single family about someone who lived, for that duration. This woman was just as good as it gets, and the gratitude that everyone felt. And all I can say is that sitting there and listening, and I didn't know her. I knew her son, and I didn't speak because, I was just there to witness. I was there to witness, which is a powerful thing in itself. It's not about sometimes what you say, but just showing up and being there, and letting and showing support. I think we all need, a go-to person, that it doesn't matter what it is. We can go to that person and express the fullness of who we are, what we're feeling, the pain that we're in. It's not going to scare someone or not going to create discomfort or, some kind of ill ease. It's not about you. It's about the person, whether it's your wife or your teacher or your mentor or a friend who isn't up to the conversation. Find someone who is. Because for me, having that person, and I don't have my best friend died 2 years ago. This was a guy who lived 7 miles away from me. The last 15 years, we spoke every day. Big loss. And as I find pictures of him, I share with his partner. As I hear more stories, I share with other people that love this man. And that's the way I keep him alive, I keep him alive because I remember him. And that's what we need to do. We need to remember. And remember all of it, because we're human beings. And we're here for a very brief time. Even if it's 100 years, it's a blink. My grandkids are now 10 and 12. And my grandson's an athlete. He's in a Quaker school. But he wants to hit home runs when he watches, when I watch him play baseball or score 3 goals when he's playing soccer. And my statement to him is, Ethan, I'm happy just to watch you breathe. You don't have to hit a home run for me. When my daughter became pregnant, she said, Dad, what do you want to be called? And I didn't know she was telling me she was pregnant. I said, what do you mean? I'm Harry. Do you want to call me Harry? She goes, no, I'm pregnant. oh, I said, I want to be a Zeta. She goes, a Zeta? Why do you want to be a Zeta? Zeta is Yiddish for grandfather. Bubby and Zeta. And I said, I want to be a Zeta because I never had one. I used to go to my friends' houses and sit on their Zeta's lap and listen to stories and to be with other kids. So I was very clear what I wanted to be.
I cannot put into words again the meaningful conversation. And I want to thank you so much.
Thank you.
For opening up your heart. And I'm looking forward to you working with our grief ministry, Taryn.
Be my honor.
And honestly, coming on that fourth Sunday in November when we will share a memorial service. And the last thing I want to say, you've helped me because it may not be something that I always talk about, but I said recently that if I never did another funeral, it would be okay because it does take its toll on me. But you have given me a reason to continue to be open to help people through that process. So it's not about me. Even though there are times when I do a service, I'm always reminded of my own experiences with death and those kind of things. But I don't want to forget either. I'm grateful for the memories and for the blessings I've experienced. And I'm just grateful that God has sent you here right next
No question about that.
to the
No
church
question about that.
and take advantage of the gifts that God has given to you. And so I thank you. And we're sitting here in this place that was formerly a synagogue. And so I have a great deal of respect for the Jewish faith and Shiva and those kinds of things. And I've learned a great deal about life and death through my good friend, Rabbi Marks, and certainly the blessings I've received, as I mentioned, about my pastor and my love for him and just life itself. And so, again, thank you so much. And our prayers are with you as you continue to make yourself available to children and to all those individuals who perhaps have lost someone. And we need people like you who are willing to offer themselves and give of themselves to make this journey meaningful. And there's no time span for grief. And so I thank you so much. And I want to conclude this service praying tonight for those who are still experiencing grief and that they might take advantage of the particular help, whether or not it's some professional help or whether or not it's a friend, as you mentioned before, friendship, and finding ways to deal with it in a way that is healthy and meaningful. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Reverend.
Gracious God, we thank you for this time spent. We pray, oh God, thy healing hand upon those who are experiencing grief and the loss of loved ones. We pray, oh God, that our lives might be a blessing to others, that we might share and be empathetic to those who experience that. And we thank you that we have a God of all comfort who comforts us. May we comfort others in the way that you comfort us. May we be there for individuals. May we not pass judgment upon anyone, but may we always be open to hear your word and be open to receive your word and be open, oh God, to share in those moments of pain and those moments of isolation that others feel, the loss of a child or a parent or sibling or friend. Help us to deal with our own journey that ultimately we know that you have given, and that a time will become where we'll no longer be on this side. But, oh God, until that time, help us to make a difference in the lives of people everywhere. Bless our children right now, and all those, oh God, who are going through this journey. And we thank you for the opportunity to be open and transparent this evening. Bless, oh God, the servant of yours as he continues to bless others. We pray. Amen.